Do your best and let the universe take care of the rest. In terms of facing uncertainty, can anyone tell me what's going to happen tomorrow?
No.
No. Can you know what's going to happen the next year? Definitely not. We have no clue about where we're going to go with the COVID virus, with economics, whether the housing price market will shoot up or shoot down, whether the currency you use is going up or down. We are completely clueless. Forget tomorrow. We sometimes have no clue. We all the time have no clue what the next moment holds. You and I live in a world of complete uncertainty. The reason why we want certainty is you and I have been wired at school from grade triple note up to matric, to university, to doctorate level, to learn facts that were somewhat predictable. And therefore, like 1 + 1 hopefully always equals 2, we can with absolutely certainty, if your kid writes that as an answer in an exam, you know he will get the right mark. Okay? So we live in a world where we have been taught how to make logical and rational what can be predictable. And therefore, you and I are wired to accept a world that can be controlled and can be predictable. As much as some of you may have studied, be it even physics or maths at university level, you knew there was always an answer. I did first year physics at university. And what was fascinating was that as part of the tutorials, there was this complex physics problem. And they would give you the answer, okay? And as part of your understanding, you had to work your way from the problem to the answer. So you kind of didn't have to ask the tutor, is my answer correct? The answer was there, but the complexity was getting to the answer. So it was absolutely certain if you got that answer, you were correct, right? Some of us had a weird way of getting there, but we got there, right? As much as you got the answer, you kind of knew the steps you took to get to that answer was correct. So what it taught you is that you could control, if you had logic and rationality, you could control the situation. If you had logic and rationality, you could be certain about the outcome. The problem is this does not prepare us for life. Life is completely uncertain, unpredictable, uncontrollable. Every single moment, because no one factored in stuff like emotions. And then we live in various ways, and then we wonder why life is completely unpredictable and uncertain. The only thing you can do in an uncertain, uncontrollable situation is be in control of yourself. Be certain about yourself. Be sure about yourself. Something that I observed as a doctor was that, especially when working in the public health service, we'd have these carnages on a Saturday night. People will be coming in, ambulances, you could hear them from the distance coming into the hospital, and there'll be wounded people, 10, 12 people coming in. And over the years, you learned, in spite of the complete chaos, uncertainty, uncontrollableness of the situation, if you were a reasonable doctor, you had to be calm, controlled, and certain about the situation. It was not that you could predict what would happen. You just had to kind of have this belief that you could deal with the situation as best you could. And it was fascinating because as much as we'd be sitting there, sometimes we'd wonder, why is it so quiet? In fact, when it was quiet, it made us feel a bit anxious and unsure. But the moment, sadly, chaos came in through the door, we'd all be hopefully on top of our game to know how we're going to deal with the situation. Everyone knew their role. Fascinatingly, to deal with uncertainty, be certain. To deal with chaos, be calm. And you actually manifest that energy, and people around you pick up on that energy. And you demonstrate that you can control the event. Even though the event in itself that came through the door was absolute chaos and destruction. So it's challenging. What then you are doing, but what's fascinating about the question of certainty, uncertainty, control, and no control is the fact that you are walking that fine line between what you can control, which is your mind, your logic, your rationality, and that which you can't control, which is everyday life from now to eternity. In fact, one of the fundamental reasons we get anxious, anxiety, is the fact that we feel we do not have the tools to deal with an uncertain future. The future is always uncertain, and no matter how many tools you have, it will never completely prepare you at a logical and rational level. It demands that you actually have a level of faith, belief, conviction in something, I have to say, that actually doesn't exist. That you can deal with the most unpredictable situation. That you have a resource, not necessarily at a logical and rational level. Some might argue at a spirit level, a passion level, that I will deal with the life as it presents itself to me. And therein, inevitably, because something interesting, if you try to control the situation, and what we do is when we try to control the situation, is we try to keep it stagnant. That means this is predictable. But life is constantly changing. That's what makes it uncertain and uncontrollable. As much as all of us at some level go to work, and you know this, in your 20, 30, 40 odd years of work, the work environment changes. What you did 20 years ago is not the same as what you're doing now, even though you're in the same position. People change, the environment changes, the food changes, your bosses change. What is seen as completely cool today is seen as uncool tomorrow. What the client wants the one day is completely different the next day. Change is inevitable. And therein is the uncertainty, the unsafe, the uncomfortable. If you're living on this planet and you are growing, change will happen. Because you are changing and the world around you is changing. And what was seen as completely solid and concrete at one point in life is not acceptable at another point. Something interesting, given the history of South Africa, is that we were at some point not open to change. And the reason was that people at some level, some people wanted things to be in a particular way. And it was routine and structured and entrenched and even enforced, military-wise, that it must stay in a particular way. And one of the interesting questions I had to a patient who grew up in a very, let me use the word, traditional South African background, and she described she was a free thinker. She plays the guitar, she does art, which was not necessarily acceptable in the family she grew up in. How did they view her? She says, as different. And then I asked the question, given that her parents had wanted life to be structured, routine, and enforced, were they happy? He says, no, they were not. The moment you try to control, the more you're fighting for a state of being, or stagnation. And the problem with that, you do not grow. Because you know what made you happy when you were a kid does not make you happy anymore. What made you happy maybe in your relationship 10 years ago doesn't make you happy anymore. You are constantly changing. And if you try to hold things the same, what you're trying to do is control the situation. The only thing you can control actually is your mind.